Good afternoon and welcome to the November 13th regular school board meeting of the Richland 2 School District. Thank everyone for being here tonight and for your presence at our board meeting. At this time, we will have our invocation and pledge of allegiance by Ms. Lindsay Ott from Richland Northeast High School. If you'll stand, please.
Thank you. Almighty God, we'd like to ask you to bless those who have served our country, defended our freedom, and preserved our liberties. We're inspired by their selfless sacrifice. Please grant them strength and support so they may serve as examples of true heroism. As for the citizens of this great nation, grant us compassion and wisdom. Never let us take our freedom for granted. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the current agenda and minutes from our previous meeting.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Spector, second by Mr. Manning. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll have special recognitions. Dr. Brochu?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to call on Ken Blackstone, our Executive Director for Communications and Strategic Partnerships.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Brochu, and staff. Tonight we have a few individuals to recognize, and as I call folks forward, I will tell you a little bit about each one of our honorees. So as I call your name, please make your way to the front, and I'll continue to describe the award, and then we'll have a photo. So first to be recognized is Spring Valley High School varsity swimmer Jonathan Boland. If you would come forward. Jonathan placed first in the state in both the 100-meter butterfly and the 100-meter backstroke events at the 4A state swim meet held in October. Jonathan's wins helped the Spring Valley boys team to place fourth in the state, and herewith Jonathan is his coach Mike Lozier and principal Dr. Baron Davis. If you'd like to come up, Dr. Davis. Congratulations to you. And I don't think I mentioned your parents were here with you as well. I apologize.
Congratulations, Jonathan.
Next, I would like to have Westwood High School Student Body President Jasmine Farmer and Vice President Taekwon Williams to come forward. And if your parents and other folks are with you, I know Dr. Cheryl Guy, Assistant Principal, is also accompanying you. They are representing the Red Hawk Student Council that won first place for projects in the School Family Relations and Membership, Motivation, and Development categories. Westwood, which of course is in its first year of existence, was the only school from South Carolina to win an award and the only school in 15 states and 110 schools to win 2 awards. So congratulations to you all for such a prestigious award. Next, I'd like to recognize Venetia Stribling, who's the dance teacher at Condor Elementary Arts Integrated Magnet School. Now, she was recently named the SC Dance Association's Dance Educator of the Year. The award commends her for exemplifying the best practices in the delivery of dance education curriculum and representing as being a role model for students and for other teachers in the field of dance education. And joining Ms. Stribling is our principal, Dr. Shirley Watson. And finally, I would like to call up My administrative assistant, Arlene Ford, who I have the pleasure of working with in our Department of Communications and Strategic Partnerships. Ms. Ford was honored recently by the National Association of Educational Office Professionals with a National First Place Award in the newsletter category for her work on the Richland County Association of Educational Office Professionals newsletter. So congratulations, Arlene. Thank you to all of our honorees for coming tonight, and congratulations once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackstone. Next, we have our faculty focus. Dr. Brochu.
Yes, I'd like to call on our Chief Academic Officer, Sue Millette, to introduce our faculty focus for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Brochu. We are delighted to have two teachers with us, plus some students. We have Lindsay Ott from Richland Northeast and Eric White from Westwood, and some of their students, and they're going to share some of their work, their project-based learning work that they've been working on this past year, and they'll talk a little bit about their design thinking and why do we have design thinking. So I'll turn it over to Eric and Lindsay.
Thank you for having us. I'd like to start off tonight by asking a question that is fundamental, vital, and it was something that we all teachers were wrestling with as we began this journey. And that question is, what was the most meaningful learning experience you've ever had in your life? When did it occur? Where were you? What happened? And why, after all these years, do you remember that experience? So a lot of us teachers got in a room together and we discussed that question. We asked it of each other, we asked it of ourselves, and the conversation that emerged from that meeting really set the framework for everything else that followed. It was interesting. When I looked back at my career in school, I had to go back to third grade. Some teachers in the room looked to high school, some middle school, and we all had these wonderful, diverse experiences. And what was so interesting, though, as we told these stories of significant and meaningful learning, we realized woven in that fabric were a lot of uniting trends. And so as we started to dissect these stories about meaningful learning, we learned quite a bit from our own experiences. We learned that these meaningful experiences usually had a presentation involved, a public audience, a dynamic product that ensued. It allowed an outlet for creativity and collaboration. And I think at the heart of it all, it was challenging, it was risky, and it was real. And as we told these stories and we shared our common experiences, we started to ask ourselves, what if we were belligerently passionate about providing those types of experiences every single day to our kids? We know what good learning feels like. We've been there before. I hate that I had to look back to third grade to remember mine, but it was there. And so we thought, what if we do this for our kids? What if our kids graduated and someone asked them that question and they gave us a nice little smile because they had a volume of experiences that they could tell? And so from that conversation, that robust conversation, came a set of beliefs that became our filter and our fuel for everything that we would do. And that first belief is that we believe that learning occurs best by doing. That our students are not just consumers, they're producers. And we want schools to be a place for them to explore that. Our second belief was that students are innovators, leaders, and designers. That every kid who walks into school has a dynamic and diverse set of talents, and schools should be a place to practice those, to explore those. And third, we believe that the walls between the school and the community must be eroded, that our students are entitled to rigorous learning experiences that allow them to act and behave as professionals and allow them to engage the community, business leaders, and other leaders. So that was the framework that really set us in motion. And so those are the beliefs that drive us. And I'll talk a little bit about the why, but I think what most importantly you're going to want to hear is from the who, our kids coming up. But in that respect, we'd like to show you a really quick video that shows you a small taste of what this looks like. We call this our elevator pitch. It's for people who want to know a little bit about what we're doing but may not have a lot of time. And so it's about a minute long, but it gives you an idea of what our kids have been doing so far this year and how these beliefs have been set in motion.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So we hope that video gave you kind of a surface understanding of what we do, and hopefully our students can give you a little more in-depth look at the type of work that we do, what we've done so far, and what we're looking ahead to. So I'm going to introduce our students and ask them to come up. From Studio D at Westwood High School, we have Jada Stewart. From iDesign at Richland Northeast, we have Caleb Mack and Martina Flojo. So if you guys just want to tell us about some of the work that you guys have been doing at Richland Northeast and what you have coming up, and then if you want to talk about Westwood, that'd be great.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Jada. I attend Westwood as told. So we're currently at Westwood in Studio D working on how to impact the community and someone's lives out of repurposed material. And we all have our individual teams, and so my team and I, we are doing women's shelter. We're going to fix their porch because I was told that it was messed up. And we are going to make blankets for the women's shelter because that was one of their wish lists. And I think Studio D is better to learn because it's like in a group environment and it's more hands-on instead of just textbook, paper, you do this, you do that. And it teaches you how to be more responsible for yourself because they don't assign you homework, you assign it to yourself.
Hi, I'm Caleb Mack.
And my name is Martina Flojo.
And in iDesign, it's like we work together to where it's a group learning project. Like earlier this year, we had a tile project where we learned more about ourselves and more about those in our surroundings.
And with the tile project, we basically looked up different symbols and learned that as being ourselves, we had to learn what we are made of and who we are. So we basically did the tile project to learn about each other and get to know with the people who will work with us and our projects in the future.
And also a project that we just finished currently was what was it called? The political campaign project, where we learned about both President Obama and Governor Romney.
And with the political campaigns, we looked in depth of the issues that both campaigns are running for. Yeah. And we basically looked at different issues and made slogans for them to help with young kids to learn about the economy.
That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to me, these students represent an investment that we've all made in what I think is our most important resource, and that's people. And I feel really fortunate to work for a school district that I feel like heavily invests in its people and really understands the importance of student achievement, and that the number one contributing factor to student achievement is well-developed teachers. So I want to thank you guys for investing in us and giving us the opportunity to develop some professional learning networks here. Since I've been in Richland too, I've had some great experiences. Recently at the Parent Partnership Summit, I had the opportunity to really get to know my customers and what was important to them. I've had the opportunity to build a network with a lot of other schools, helping them implement project-based learning. Longleaf Middle School, Dent Middle School, North Springs Elementary, Pontiac Elementary, recently Muller Road Middle School have all been really excited about project-based learning, have been really welcoming to us, and they're excited about the work and excited about investing in our kids. So we just want to thank you for investing in us and allowing us the opportunity to do this work.
Questions for Ms. Ott or Mr. White? Mr. White, if you'd come back up for us, please. Questions from the board or comments?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Manning.
I'm not exactly familiar. Tell me what the G school is and the D school is.
Okay. The G School is the name that Eric and I kind of worked under, and we produce all of our videos under that name. The Stanford D School is a graduate program through Stanford University where we draw a lot of inspiration, particularly our process that we use to implement project-based learning.
And so is the G schools here in Richland too?
It's Eric and I.
It's you too? Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments from the board? Tell me what you're doing, how it translates or transfers, and how you measure it transferring into student achievement. How do you gauge, based upon the experiences they're having, how are you able to measure then the effectiveness on their actual achievement?
Other than the obvious numerical ways, I'll say one thing and I'll let Eric finish it up. But we tell our students that if you can't talk about something, then you don't really know it. We ask our students to talk about what they've learned, not only to us, but also to their peers and to their whole class and to larger audiences. We also ask them to reflect about every single thing they do, and a culminating assessment for every project that we do is a written reflection, often painfully lengthy, as I'm sure they would tell you.
And you critique that written document to ensure that not only subject-wise, but content and the grammatical issues and all of those things are sort of built into your evaluation or rating of that student's performance.
Absolutely. The reflection is, I'm an English teacher, so
That's good.
I obviously, grammar is an issue, but also we ask them to elaborate on points that we find particularly thought-provoking, or if we feel like they did not elaborate enough, we'll ask them to kind of expand on that. So it's a written dialogue between us.
Mr. Chair, one question.
I think he wants to give a comment, then you can explain.
Sure, I'll piggyback just for a little bit. I think we look at the conventional assessments as really the floor of what we do. I'd like to talk just for a second about the ceiling. I think at the heart of everything that we're doing with them is around innovation. Years back, The Economist magazine wrote that innovation is the single most important ingredient of any modern economy. And the state of education that it is today, it seems like we seem to think that we're going to test our way out of this. But I think at the heart of what we're doing is that I think we can innovate our way out of this. And I think the more we give kids opportunities to innovate and design and lead, and those are assessed as well in many different ways through rubrics and through self and peer reflection. That is really what we're chasing. And Lindsay doesn't brag about it, but has wonderful language arts test scores. But I think chasing just the test scores is a race to the bottom, and the problem is you might win. And I think really what we're going after is a student that when they graduate, they're not just looking for a job, they're going to be job creators. But I think at the heart of this is that kids are able to make their own dent in the universe. That if I push in, it goes out somewhere else. And that kids realize that, I think embedded in this is an entrepreneurial spirit. A spirit that the world is created by us. And they're no smarter than you. And so if you're given a process to design and create, that when you graduate, you're going to have real, honest-to-goodness skills to accompany that content knowledge that you have. And so we kind of look at the typical assessments as the floor, but we're constantly climbing toward the ceiling as much as we can.
And that defined standard, it exists somewhere. Besides, I'm sure it exists in your head. It exists somewhere so that students know what that ceiling is and whether or not they've reached it.
Sure. When we're looking at, say, creativity, right? How do you really assess that? And and we actually have self and peer evaluations and rubrics that look at how you're progressing toward that. It's not necessarily a punitive measure, but really a where are we now and where could we be? And so when we assess those types of skills, we're really aware not to treat it as well, you got 10 points off because you only had so many ideas, but an idea that you can reflectively think about where you are and where you're going, and doing that through writing and reflection, that means a lot to us. And so we have kids having goals where they could be, but also being able to assess where they are and what they need to do to get there. And so it's a constant feedback loop and a constant reflective process that really, I think, is getting to the heart of what we want our kids to be, designers and reflectors.
Other questions, comments from the, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it's an individual measure for each student. For example, Martina is a fabulous artist. She has a really incredible vision. So when I assess her, I want to see where she started and how can she push herself. Caleb's a wonderful writer. How can he, where did he start and where is he now and where is that growth? And so really we can assess for each individual student and not apply one assessment to everybody.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Manning.
How do students get into your program? How are they selected for your program?
That's a good question. What we do is we look for student interest. So over the summer we had parent meetings and we basically describe the style of learning that resonates with us. We ask our parents, how did you learn best? And we engage them in a conversation, but at the end of it all, we basically say, if you want to play in our sandbox, we'd love to have you. We're not looking for a certain type of kid. We're not looking for a certain type of GPA. We're looking for a student who wants to learn in a different way. And if that's you, we'd love to have you. And so it's not about competition or interviews or anything. It's basically, this is how we learn. Would you like to learn this way? Well, come on in.
How did parents find out about it? Because I haven't heard about your programs until now, so I don't know how our parents found out about it.
Sure. You want to?
It was for Richland Northeast. I know our guidance counselors went and just were giving kids options for our feeder schools and said, one of your options is the iDesign program, and this is what they do. I think Westwood took a similar approach, and when students were signing up for courses, just said, this is an option you have, or these things you're interested in, and they opted in that way.
And how many students do you have now? What's your max?
I have about 80. I think Eric might have around 60 students.
And are they with you all day or part of the day? Or how does that
they're
work?
with us in a cohort for 4 periods of the day. So we have them for half a day, and they go to other electives and math on the part of the time they're not with us.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Thank you very much, folks. Next, we have on our agenda public participation. I have one person who has signed up, Mr. Tony Grant. If you would come forward and state your name again for the record and your address and your permanent mailing address. You have 3 minutes, sir.
I want to give you all that information. Hello, Mr. Chairman. How
Hello,
are you?
Mr. Grant. How are you, sir?
Good.
Good, sir.
And Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tony Grant, 2114 Bermuda Hills Road, Columbia, 29223.
Thank you, sir.
699-9900.
57
ATG
years
at
old.
grantdsi.com. Let me stop. But I've been here before. It's been nearly a year, and as I've said before, I am my wife and I are parents of two children who have graduated from the district, and we currently have twin daughters that are enrolled in the district at Northeast. So the district is of interest to us, has been of interest to us, and our children have truly grown. Both are matriculating at the respective institutions of higher learning, and we're grateful to the district for providing them the preparation that they needed to be there. Nearly a year ago, as I said, we were immersed in a rather intense discussion about redistricting in our district. The dialogue brought about many iterations of a district's plan. The end result, in my opinion, took bold leadership. Bold leadership on behalf of the board, bold leadership on behalf of the staff, and certainly bold leadership on behalf of Dr. Katie Brochu. I'm certain the decision that this board made was not very popular, and you probably still get some pushback. But as a parent, I stand here to say to you that I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for what you've done. And I want you to know that the intentions of this district well received. It's well received, and I've read comments in the paper. I don't get those types of comments that I've heard about people being dissatisfied with the district, people being dissatisfied with Dr. Brochu's leadership, people being dissatisfied with the board because you took bold leadership, and you are to be commended for that. And I hope that no one's penalized for taking bold leadership. It took direct, bold leadership to move this district forward. We've done it. 1 year later, I had the pleasure last week of attending the Parent Summit and spent a lot of time there. My wife and my two children who were selected by the school to attend. And I want to say to you, for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to attend, I gave up 6 or 7 hours of that day to be there. And it was something that I consider an investment, and I consider forward thinking, the right thing to do for this district. And so I simply want to say, like the person, like when the Bible, when Jesus healed 10 people of leprosy, only one came back to say thank you. I want to be that one to come back to say thank you for your bold leadership. Everybody. And I want you to know that the circles that I travel in, and the circle that I travel in is a diverse circle, and not a simple minority circle. It's a very diverse circle of people who I work with and live in the community with. And they have all said thank you for your leadership. So I want to say thank you personally. And I want to thank Dr. Brochu because this was a very tough time for her last year. And she led with bold leadership.
Time, Mr.
I'm grateful. I'm thankful. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Ms. Rhonda, and I'm not sure, Rhonda, how to pronounce the last name. It's not your handwriting, it's my eyesight, I'm sure. Meisner, is it? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon, evening. Thank you for letting me talk. I'm going to start with a quote from the Bible, too, and that is about the Laodiceans that God said was bittersweet in his mouth, and that their lukewarm attitude towards moving forward and towards what they were meant to be should be spit out. I'm here to say that I'm disappointed in you as a board and as a committee. And I think all of you know my issues. First of all, I'm going to start with the gifted and talented group. These are students, mediocrity is a ruinous society, right? We have to put these students in a place where they're going to excel. And words are very empty when there's no action that follows the words. So I would say to you, all of you, educators, parents, I look at the signs and say, I'm here for educators, parents, and so forth. Where are you? Where are you for the gifted and talented? And I guess, I will tell you this from another parent of a gifted and talented. It is a program that has no measurable outcomes. It is a program that has no meaningful assertions. So while I am a classical learning proponent, what I would say to you is look at what's happening to our school district. And I know that, everybody has their own opinion, which I appreciate, the wonderful spirit that we have here. But I'm disappointed in you as a board. I'm disappointed with the 40 points less on the SAT. I'm disappointed with your lack of activism for students that are the top of the metric. When we dumb down to society, we become a dumb society. And I know that those are harsh words, but it's important that you hear that. And it's important that it's a record that you heard that, because I want to see action from you, and I want to, as a community, request response from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Amelia Mackey. If you come up and state your name and your address, please. Ms. Mackey. Good evening.
Chairman, you want my thing. Amelia Mackey, 47 Hunters Pond Drive. To the Chairman, Board of Trustees, Dr. Brochu, District Executive Staff. I'm a parent of 2 children at Ridgeview High School, SIC co-chair there, and a newly elected member of the South Carolina State Board of Trustees. As young children, we're taught the fundamentals of basic etiquette in the form of good manners, starting with teaching our children to say please and thank you. I say please a gracious plenty, as I regularly express my concerns, make requests, or ask questions of the board or appropriate district staff, depending on my particular interest at that time. And today I'm here to say, and I did not talk to Mr. Grant first, thank you. The Parent Partnership Summit that took place on Thursday was nothing short of awesome and thought-provoking. I appreciate the leadership of Dr. Brochu, Dr. McDaniel, and a host of other supportive and supporting district staff members and the district design team, too many to name here, for giving birth to the concept and seeing it through to its fruition. I was enlightened prior to that event after reading Jamie Vollmer's book, Schools Cannot Do It Alone, and even more encouraged after hearing Mr. Vollmer share of his ideas of community support and all that that entails to create a strong support system, or stronger, for and within our public school system. By embracing the ideas of all stakeholders, parents, churches, communities, civic organizations, businesses, consumers, and ultimately our primary interest, our students. I'm thankful to the superintendent, Dr. McDaniel, and their staff members for implementing a safe environment for parents, educators, administrators, and students, business leaders, community members, and others to come together to exchange ideas in a positive, engaging, non-threatening environment. Gaining perspective from another person's point of view is an enriching experience if embraced properly, and that is precisely what took place on Thursday, and I thank you. I will always support my children in their endeavors, their educational pursuits, their lifelong endeavors, and of course, by default, their respective schools. I stand here today publicly to proclaim and pledge my support to Richland School District 2 and its leadership as it continues its endeavors to listen to, embrace, and engage the community it conserves. I'm on board and will continue to be a constructive, positive voice to herald the great conversation that I see taking place here in Richland District 2. I recently read a quote from a book I was reading, Mrs. Kennedy and Me. The author, CI agent Clint Hill, described a plaque that hung above his colleague's office door that said, "If you're talking, you're not learning a thing." In that vein, I thank you for creating a safe, productive, uplifting, and criticism-free environment for listening, on Thursday, November 8th, and I look forward to a continuation of the fruits of your labor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are the persons that signed up to speak. However, if there's anyone in the audience who did not sign up but wish to speak to the board, you have an opportunity to do so at this time. Thank you very much.
Chairman, I would just like to
Ms.
make
Anderson.
note for those who give the invocation to be mindful of the different cultures that we have in the district. And Mr. Blackwell, I'm going to ask you to be responsible for ensuring when we have district staff to do the invocation that you be aware of the different cultures in our district so that we do not offend anyone of different cultures in the prayer.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Facilities report, Dr. Brochu.
Yes, I'd like to call on Jack Carter, our Executive Director of Operations, to please come forward and answer any questions the board may have on our facilities report.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have this week's report. We have them from both of our construction management firms. A couple of things I'd like to point out. On Catawba Trail, you notice it says the surety company is now doing work. That's basically because the buildings and finishes company has essentially gone bankrupt. So their bonding company is coming and finishing up, and it's basically punch list stuff. So that's really going to work out just fine. At the work we did at Richland Northeast that was planned for this year is essentially done, except for skirting of the two press boxes. I couldn't do that until we got the press box installed and all the concrete poured because it has to be field measured. So we now have some estimates on that, getting some quotes, and we should get that done here fairly soon. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have on our agenda the budget update. Dr. Brochu.
Yes, Chief Financial Officer Bob Davis will share information regarding budget update.
Thank you, Dr. Brochu. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, 2 points. One is last week I did have the opportunity to attend a presentation by Grant Gibson. He's the Senate Finance Committee staffer. Grant's description of the economy, his operative word was tepid. He was not saying that we were looking at a budget reduction in mid-year. At the same time, he wouldn't absolutely predict that there wouldn't be one in the coming year. Along the same line, I believe the board saw an email that Dr. Burgess was kind enough to share with us regarding the Board of Economic Advisors revision of the revenue estimate for next year upward, and about 3%. So again, that was good news for the legislature when they come back in January to consider some budget implications. Again, also in her email, you'll recall that she said that they were also saying that they were concerned about the economy as we move into calendar year 2013. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about budget matters.
Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Davis, those two views seem to be contradictory in terms of one's projection describing it as being tempered and the other showing us was it a $60 million projected?
The number they actually increased it was $144 million over the
next year
current, yes sir, for the estimate, for the revenue estimate. And again, percentage-wise, it's a small percentage of the state budget.
Other questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have the voting on the executive session's items. The chair will entertain a motion. Under the student appeals.
Mr. Chair, I recommend student number 1 and number 2 attend Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the school year and also attend Loradac.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Brill on student number 1 and number 2. It's been seconded by Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion on those two? She apparently so. We'll do those two as she has presented them. It's moved by Ms. Brill and second by Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next.
Student number 3, recommend Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the school year and community service.
Can we do another one as well?
Second. Are you going to?
I'm going to ask Ms. Brill if she can go ahead and do.
There was.
I think you can go ahead and make the motion now.
Okay.
Sure you can.
And number 4, recommend Anna Boyd for the remainder of the school year. Number 5, recommend Anna Boyd for the remainder of the school year. And then number 6, recommend Blythewood Academy. And number 7, deny the appeal. Number 8, recommend Blythewood Academy for 45 days. Number 9, Blythewood Academy.
Real, before you go any further on the list, can I have a friendly amendment to number 8? That to be, instead of 45 days, it's the remainder of the school year?
Yes. Unless there's any objection, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. So we're at 10 now?
Yes.
Are you at 10? Recommend Blythewood Academy, number 10. And number 11, recommend Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the school year and Loredak. And number 12, deny the appeal, recommend adult ed. That's it.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved by Ms. Brill and second by Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Next, student readmission request. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved that we follow the recommendations presented to us by the administration for, I'm going to do both, student readmittance as stated on here with and without objections. And also, Mr. Chair, I would like to go ahead and make the motion for the student listed to attend adult education.
I think we need to do those separate, Ms. Anderson, since they're listed.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So the student readmission request has been moved by Ms. Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Spector. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 7-0. Ms. Anderson, would you like to do the next one at this time?
Yes, go ahead and allow the student to apply for adult education.
Been moved by Ms. Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Spector. Any further discussion? on student admission requests in the district adult ed program? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Ratification of personnel. Dr. Brochu.
Yes, I'd like to call on our Chief Human Resource Officer, Roosevelt Garrick, at this time.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board, we have for your consideration one page of professional recommendations and one page of classified recommendations.
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Anderson and second by Ms. Spector that we adopt the ratification of the personnel matters presented to the board. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Thank you very much. Motion passes 7-0. Under old business, action requested. Approval of proposed revision to the policy BEDB board agenda. Dr. Brochu.
Yes, we have presented that to the board previously, and at this time, our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Cheryl Washington, will attempt to answer any and all questions you may have at this time.
Any questions or comments from the board to Dr. Washington?
I talked
Ms. Anderson.
briefly with Dr. Washington and asked for a friendly amendment to that. And in the statement, we're going to put a comma between the words item of business not on the agenda, comma, in general, comma, should not be added.
Okay, I see.
It flows smoother that way if you're reading it.
With that editorial change, Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Next, under old business, action requested the STEM magnet program proposal. Dr. Brochu.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, we have shared information previously regarding the STEM magnet program proposal, and at this time, I'll ask that Sue Millette, our Chief Academic Officer, be available to answer any additional questions you may have.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, is that a cell phone that's ringing? We can't locate, or what is the problem? Pardon me? Would you step her purse out with her, please?
Any questions or comments regarding the...
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board? The chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve.
So moved by Mr. Manning. Thank you. Is there a second?
I second it.
Second by Ms. Brill. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes 6-0. I stand corrected. I've been saying 7-0 all night. Old habits are hard to break. So that motion and all previous motions that passed 6-0, not 7-0.
That's true.
Thank you very much. Next, on the new business, no action requested. The annual financial and procurement reports from our auditors. Dr. Brochu.
Yes, I will ask that our Chief Financial Officer, Bob Davis, introduce our auditors.
Thank you, Dr. Brochu. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, you have in your possession the comprehensive annual financial report prepared by our staff and the external auditors. You also have the audit, the procurement audit report as well, a one-page letter. With us tonight, we have Ms. Leslie Kelly. She's the partner in charge of the audit with McGregor Company, LLP. Ms. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we have completed the audit for the financial statements for Richland School District 2 for the year that ended June 30th, 2012, and a copy of that report has been presented to you. To summarize, we have issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements as reported. We've reported one material misstatement related to the accrual of payroll liabilities restating the prior year fund balance. The general fund balance increased by $1.5 million to $30,163,168 at the end of June 30th, 2012. Also, in accordance with the government auditing standards, we have issued an unqualified opinion on the compliance with all major federal programs. We have also issued the procurement audit report in accordance with the audit program provided by the South Carolina Budget and Control Board. We report in that the district materially complied with the procurement operating policies and procedures of the district. Any questions?
As the board is aware, they just received one of the documents on last night in the procurement information today, so they may not necessarily have had the opportunity to review it in enough detail to have any questions, but I certainly will open the floor for any questions or comments the board would have at this time.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Anderson.
I think that I would just prefer to call Mr. Davis at a later date and discuss my questions with him.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Dr. Fleming.
Comment is, I'm glad we got a clean audit. I feel like that we have, over the years, have been able to do this, and because of the financial people that we have and those running our department. Thank you, Mr. Davis, and just that.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Let
Davis.
me, first of all, praise my own staff, Dr. Fleming. Thank you, sir. Ms. Allen, Ms. Salter, Mr. Neal, Ms. Denini, they've been doing tremendous work for us, and I'm the benefactor of that. Secondly, let me publicly thank Ms. Kelly and McGregor and Company LLP. They worked with us very closely under a rather tight timeline, as Dr. Brochu is well aware, and I'm pleased to have the report presented tonight. And Ms. Kelly, she and her staff worked very well with us, and I certainly appreciate professional expertise and courtesies.
I'd like to also echo those remarks. I had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Kelly earlier, and it was extremely helpful to me, so I want to publicly thank you for that as well.
My pleasure.
Other questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly.
Certainly, and if anyone has any questions of me after tonight, you're certainly welcome to contact me directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, new business, no action requested. College entrance exam discussion. Dr. Brochu?
Yes. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Debbie Ham, our Chief Information Officer, to introduce this portion of our agenda.
And I'm going to do just a very brief introduction here. Test scores can tell you a little bit by themselves, but the real insights come from when you connect the kinds of practices that are going on in schools to the test scores. That's where the interpretation, the ideas for improvement, et cetera, come from. So starting last school year, instead of just looking at the scores, we started bringing together entire data teams that bring a variety of perspectives to the table as we analyze the data. So tonight, I'm happy to introduce Jeff Potts, who you know well, who'll be leading a conversation with our data team and the board. And I'd like the SAT, ACT data team to please stand up. It was a large team. Many of them could be here tonight, so if you'd stand so they would know who you are. Thank you very much. So here they are. They're available to answer your questions, and I think Mr. Potts is going to kind of moderate the discussion and present some information here.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm kind of planned tonight. I'm not used to the full discussion, so I thought I'd prepare just a short little piece of information of some background stuff in regards to what the data team was able to see, and then I'd like to have two of our guidance counseling directors, Jan Post and Teresa Farrell, come up and tell a little story of what's happened. We also have some principals in the building tonight who would be happy to answer some of these questions as well. I first want to start with just a quick summary. The SAT was an exam that originated as an IQ test a long time ago. Back in the 1920s, it was made from an IQ test called Army Alpha. and it was really used in the educational purpose to select the highest level of students from all across really America. The focus in general now is really on K through 12 learning cognitive reasoning. The ACT was an exam that came in the late 1950s and was used really as something to play upon this college entrance exam that was growing popular in the United States. It really has a slightly different purpose, but it still serves a very similar purpose to test the practical knowledge that students would learn for the most part in high school. There's some differences that exist between the two exams. Some of these practical ones in terms of format, how their questions are ordered, and a big one in terms of the scoring basis. The SAT penalizes students for random guessing, while the ACT has no penalty for random guessing. A couple big differences also include really the content or the meat that's in the two exams. The SAT has three basic summary pieces, which include math, critical reading, and a mandatory writing section, while the ACT really has four components: math, reading, English, and science, and also has an optional essay. A big part that we need to keep in mind when college entrance exams, when the scores come out, is that the students that are reported are not the student's highest score overall. They are the student's last score that they take. And there are many students who will take the exams for many different reasons and across different periods of time while they're in high school. And so it's not the highest examination or their highest composite, it's their last administration that they take. A key thing that I want to state, and the data team really kept coming back to this, it's a message that's posted on the SAT from College Board, and I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud. Media and others often rank states, districts, and schools on the basis of SAT scores, despite repeated warnings that such rankings are inappropriate. The SAT is a strong indicator of trends in college-bound population, but it should never be used alone in such comparisons because demographics and other non-school factors can have a strong effect on scores. If ranked, schools and states that encourage students to apply to college may be penalized because scores tend to decline with a rise in the percentage of test takers. One of the things that our group really looked at is over the last couple of years we have seen a decrease in SAT scores. In fact, I think it's somewhere up in the 70-point range over the last couple of years. And we asked ourselves, what other evidence is there that this kind of thing is happening in other places? And we looked in the ACT score, and we didn't necessarily see anything that resembled what we see with SAT. We looked at HSAP, and once again, we really don't see huge trend losses like we do with the SAT. We looked at end-of-course exams that our high school students take, and once again, we're not seeing dramatic decreases like we do with the SAT. We also look at our AP exams, which have consistently been the highest in the state in terms of the percentage of students scoring 3 or above. And we also looked at on-time graduation, which has gone up now for the last 4 years. One thing to keep in mind is, of course, as what was stated on the little warning from College Board, is looking at the percentage of students taking the exam. And we've had a pretty heavy increase in students taking the SAT over the last couple of years. We've also, at least over the last 2 years, seen a decline in students taking the ACT. Right now we have about 2/3 of our seniors taking the SAT, and not quite 50% of our students taking the ACT. In all, we have more than 3/4 of our students taking a college entrance exam. And I think as far as the SAT goes, I think we have the 6th highest percentage of seniors taking the SAT within the state. There's one of the things that we noticed within the data team is there's 2 factors that came up and was a heavy factor, and that is family income and highest level of parent education. And the national trend, or the Richland 2 trends, mirror what's happening nationally. But as as the family income goes up, so does the average student performance. And the same thing with the parent education. As the level of parent education increases, the expectation of student performance also increases. I think this is kind of where I'm going to end, but one of the things that is really interesting about the SAT is that they claim that they're a very good predictor of college performance, especially after their freshman year. And it does measure in some ways performance after the freshman year. But most of the studies that we find only say that somewhere between about 18% and 28% of students' grade point average after their freshman year of high school can be actually predicted using the SAT. And actually, in many cases, using college entrance exam like the SAT really doesn't give much better predictability than students' grade point average in high school. At this time, I'd like to kind of have our two guidance directors, Jan Post and Teresa Farrell, come up and kind of give you a perspective of what this looks like at the school level in terms of getting students to take in the exams and what kind of changes we've had.
Chairman, Board. My name is Jan Post, and I am the Director of Guidance at Richland Northeast. And
I'm Teresa Farrell, Director of Guidance at Spring Valley.
The group that got together were curious about this data that we are seeing also. But we do need to emphasize the fact that more and more students are taking the SAT. And so the reason we encourage Jeff to mention what the SAT says to us is that the more students that take it, your statistics are going to change because of the numbers. You know, a lot of our students now are going to be taking the SAT, and because it is online, they don't come to us to ask which one should we take. Now, we encourage them, but a lot of times they will be taking them without our advice, and a lot of students want to take it because their parents want them to take it, not because they're necessarily taking the appropriate coursework. Those students that we see that take Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 prior to taking the SAT generally do better. And what we think is happening is a lot of students who take Algebra 1 Part 1 in the 9th grade, Algebra 1 Part 2 in the 10th grade, and then end up with Geometry only in the 11th grade, still take the SAT, but they aren't prepared to take the SAT. The difference between the SAT and the ACT is, one of the things is that the SAT has the ACT has 4 parts. It includes a quarter science and a quarter math, but the math goes all the way up through trigonometry. It goes well beyond Algebra 2. And so it is an achievement test versus an aptitude test. The Scholastic Aptitude Test will have half math and half verbal. Some students, they want to take, I encourage them to take both, try it, see which one you do better, and then take that one again. However, that's not always what happens. And the students, now that everything's online, they do not even come to the guidance department. It is strictly going directly online to sign up. So we can encourage them to do these things, but that's not always what they do. There's some other items that we want to cover too.
I think with any standardized test, you're going to see peaks and valleys. And I think that's probably just part of what we're seeing. If you look at a 10-year study, we're pretty consistent with where we've been. Again, I think we're doing the right things as guidance counselors. We're advising students. We're helping them take a test to be prepared for college if that's what they choose to do. We're still doing the same things. We're offering workshops We're offering free online opportunities, so we're still doing the same things. I just think it's part of the trend that you see in any standardized test, the dips and the peaks.
The one thing I think we need to remind us too is that several years ago, in fact it ended in 2010, the board was paying for every junior in the school district who wanted to take an SAT or an ACT to be advised by the guidance staff, and we would look at the top of the line kids, the top 10%. We paid for both, or you paid for both, the SAT and the ACT. And the students who were in the middle of that rung, we had them take the plan and the PSAT. We looked at the PSAT and the plan scores and encouraged them. We would pay for one or the other depending on what their score was. And the bottom quartile, we basically said, why don't you wait until your senior year to take it? And then we paid for it the senior year. That stopped 2 years ago. So that probably had an influence too, because the SAT and the ACT is now $50 for each. Now, free and reduced lunch, we still get fee waivers for that, and students are encouraged to get those and they do have to come to us for those.
I think Roger can testify, any platform that we can get to, we do explain the differences in the SAT and ACT and give them guidance.
And we have individual graduation plans, the IGPs, that we meet with the students every year, one-on-one, and go over that. We have sheets that we give to the students and explain it, and their parents are invited to come to those. So we have that. And the one thing I think it's really important to remember is if you take those students who did take Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, they are still scoring quite well. They are doing, you can, I think, disaggregate the scores, and you can see that they are doing fine.
Thank you very much. Open the floor for some conversation and discussion with the board. Our chair will entertain comments or questions from the board at this time. Ms. Spector.
I'd like to just clarify one thing. You had mentioned online. Are the students taking the SATs online now, or are they still going to a school site to take?
I'm sorry. No, they apply to take it online.
They register.
Register.
That really hasn't changed. I'm trying to think when my son was, and my daughter, they
That is
actually
new.
applied.
That's new.
That's fairly new, last
Before
5 or
it was
6
paper.
years.
They came to us and got an application with paper, and now they don't need to do that. They go directly to collegeboard.com.
Because even when Austin graduated, we signed up collegeboard.com to take it. And that was in 2009. He graduated in 2009.
Around 2006 is when it went to online.
But they were both for quite a while. Now you can't, there isn't even, we don't receive the paper applications anymore, and before they did.
How can we determine the students that should not be taking it yet? I know that's a broad question, and you kind of covered it, but is there any way that we work with College Board or whatever and just distinguish?
Yeah, what you can tell them, we say to the students, remember there's about 30 to 40% geometry on this test, so if you haven't finished geometry or you haven't taken it yet, you shouldn't. Plus it goes up through Algebra 2. So many of our students are not taking the Algebra 2 until their senior year. Not many, but there is that element of student. The students who have been in a magnet program that's academically strong, and they started with Algebra 1 either in middle school or in the 9th grade and were successful in it, if they can be in Algebra 1 at least by the 9th grade and geometry by the 10th grade and Algebra 2 finishing that in the 11th grade, they should be prepared. Many of our students are well beyond that, and they're still doing good on the test. But it's those students that they want to go to college, and it's not that they can't get into college, it's just that they're taking the test too soon, and they are cramming in the last 2 years, their senior year, trying to get the Algebra 2 and something else beyond it. State colleges have now increased, just in the last 3 years, is it 3 years that USC have increased the fourth math? So they have now, you cannot no longer get into the state-supported schools with just Algebra 2. You have to go on to one math higher than Algebra 2, and this is fairly new. So what's happened is that they're cramming that into the senior year because some of them are just getting the Algebra 1 Part 1 and Part 2 in 9th and 10th grade.
Other questions or comments from the board? Ms. Brill.
When did we stop paying, and do you know why? I mean, was it a budgetary concern strictly, no other reason?
The other interesting thing is that some schools, Furman, for instance, Wake Forest, are not looking at SAT scores or ACT scores. They're looking at a holistic student instead of scores. They're looking at GPA, activities, class rank. So there
portfolios of what they've done, possibly senior projects. So we're hearing that that's down the road, coming more and more. Wake Forest was the first, but now many others are starting to follow.
There's a reason for that.
So less emphasis on the SATs.
Other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Manning.
Ms. Millett, are you part of this data team?
I had representatives from academics participate.
So after the discussion of sort of why we are where we are, and in those discussions, Ms. Millett, what's the answer for moving forward? What are the initiatives that we need to have in place to move us forward with this area?
Well, basically, we're going to get back together with the data team and plan our strategies accordingly. But up to this point, we have not looked at any additional initiatives as far as helping out, our students. The budget was cut. The money from the State Department was cut as well for some of the additional assistance. But there are other things that we can do to move forward and work with the guidance department at each high school and middle schools as well.
I think some of our principals have some.
Main thing we can do at high schools is to develop more and more opportunities for kids to learn how to negotiate the test. The SAT is designed as a K through 12 instrument. It's never has been intended to be you cram for it in high school. That just will not accomplish it. What you can do is help kids gain extra points if they learn how to negotiate successfully the test. Hence, the different workshops that are given. It used to be Larry Mills did that, but he's since retired, that help kids understand how to negotiate the taking of the test. And you can, if you have that population of students that are scoring just below those that are at the national average or high, a certain percentage of those that are in that next tier, if they do that kind of training, they can increase their scores as much as 100, 130 points. But it's not because they learn more. It's because they know how to take the test better.
Let me ask a question since you're there, Dr. Martineau. If you roll back the numbers and look at it, has anyone actually looked to be able to say that we have more students taking the test now who have not taken the prerequisite courses that we feel are predictors than we did 3 years ago, 5 years ago? And so has anyone looked and said, well, we actually are having more students testing who've not had Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, and Algebra 3. I can buy your premise if we say those numbers are there, but if we've not looked at that, then I still feel that that's a question that's unanswered that I think directly impacts their performance on the test. And so I'd really like to know whether or not that has changed. Or do we have the same number of students taking the test that we took before, had those skills before, but they're not doing as well? Or do we have more students taking it now who don't have those prerequisite courses?
Well, I'll have to yield to
Yes, and I
thoughts
really,
on that.
but somebody behind you might be able to help us.
One thing I can say is the College Board actually reports out a figure, percentage of students who have met some sort of requirement selected of, I think it's 3 math courses and 3 English courses, or have been enrolled. Understand it's a self-selected, the students actually telling College Board whether or not they have had these required courses. But it looks like we can't get it for previous years because they haven't reported it previously, but it looks like we have about 40% of our students right now who take it who haven't had that preparatory, who haven't had all the coursework for it. And that's a lot.
That's pretty significant.
It is significant.
And again, that's self-selected, that the students
Right.
fill
They're
that
taking it
out,
so they can see.
Jackson and others, and
Right.
so we don't have that individual data for individual students to cross-check that.
Right. In order to do that, we would have to look at when the student took the exam at the time and go back to the transcripts for those students. And I think Dr. Martin was saying that sometimes he has gone through, he hasn't for this recent graduating class, but has gone through and been able to disaggregate that information. I'm not positive, but the guidance counselors may have some in terms of how many numbers of students actually are prepared and are not prepared. I don't know if you have that.
I don't personally have any numbers as such, but I would venture to say there are more now than before. But, I don't have any statistics or anything like that.
Mr. Black.
Ms. Anderson, and then Ms. Manning.
Mr. Chairman, I've often heard several students say that they take it initially to see exactly what the test is all about in the areas that they need to concentrate in. So maybe we need to get them to understand that that's the wrong way to go. It's too bad we don't have the gentleman you said that used to teach in the areas.
Mr. Mills.
Mr. Mills, all about how it's test-taking strategies is the bottom line. And I think that's why you have so many that are taking it early so that they can prepare how to take it to get their scores up. So I guess we need to kind of relate that to them.
Can I address something on that, though?
Sure.
Kids are very, very smart when it comes to taking an SAT. Unlike the ACT, the SAT has 3 sections, and this ELA section, or critical reading, and then there's math, and then there's writing. The critical reading section and the math section are what the state uses for the Life Scholarship and the Palmetto Fellows, okay, just those 2. And they will let you mix and match your scores. So you can take it in January of your junior year, May of your junior year, October of your senior year, and again in January of your senior year. And whichever score out of those 4 times that you take the test is the best, that the college and the state of South Carolina Department of Education will take those 2 best scores and combine them for the 1,100 for the Life Scholarship or 1,200 for the Palmetto Fellows. So students say, hey, I got a 600 on my verbal, so in math, I'm only going to do my math second time. But you see his math score, which is high, but the verbal score is low. But that's what you're seeing as being reported. My own child did that. Okay, I'm telling you, it's done as a strategy because they know. Matt said, I've maxed out on my reading scores. I don't think I can do any better. So I'm just going to do the math. He was looking for an extra boost because he was going to Clemson and he wanted a certain, a little extra SAT, scholarship. And so he took it in January of his senior year and got over a 710. Well, that added up with the other, gave him the little scholarship. But he did crummy on his critical reading. He said, I did it, but I didn't try. So he wasn't worried about what the board was thinking of the SAT scores. He wanted those two scores added together, and it worked for him. Okay, so I'm telling you.
Okay, so it doesn't hurt them to take.
No, they can mix and match
It's
their
really to their
scores.
advantage to take it as many times as possible.
Absolutely,
So
and we
Susan, that
encourage
was
them to
wrong.
do that.
Somebody-
So I hate that you're looking at the scores, which are the last scores, because they don't look at their junior year that might have been better in critical reading or verbal that year, and then the next year they take it again. So seeing the scores go down really doesn't bother Teresa and I, because we're seeing the kids mix and match their SAT scores.
So
You
they're
cannot
smarter
mix-
than we give them credit for being.
I mean, all right. So I don't. And what the College Board says is, don't really count on that being something that should be evaluated how the schools are doing, because the kids are using them to get in for their own purposes. See what I mean?
Let's keep your questions coming directly between you and the board. Unfortunately, the public's not part of this discussion. Any comments, observation from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Manning.
I do think that the conversation about how we use the SAT and what we have the SAT is something that we need to continue. I hate the fact that the conversation started when we had a dip as opposed to starting, kind of at the beginning of the year to say we're starting to see a shift and can we as a district look at this differently. However, we do get reported on that. I was even looking at the Furman statistics. So I, as a parent, am I interested in my student going to Furman? They rate their own colleges based off the top quartile in their scores on the SATs. So not, what's that? So, I just collegetoolkit.com. If I go look out there, they're rating the top quartile of students. It's on our state report card as a district. I think it's what parents traditionally understand is a mark of excellence, and it is still being used. I know South Carolina, Clemson University, as you said, both require us to have good SAT scores. So, I don't want to lament too much and take too much time on why are we here or whatever. What I want is, what are we doing going forward? Do we have a website, Ken, where students can go through and do a checklist to see, I can put a password in, right? And it shows me whether I've got a strong password or a weak password. Do we have a checklist that students can use for the SAT scores to show that they have a high level of preparation or a low level of preparation based off classes? Are we marking students who don't have the prerequisite classes so that we can follow up with them and try to, before it gets too late, before they're in their junior or senior year? And as you said, we have students who are self-help now with the internet and everything else. Students and parents are relying much less on guidance counselors and people to tell them when their students are ready, and relying much more on things on the web or other information. So what are we doing to move forward to help with that? And I think that's really my focus is, where are we going? It is a discussion we need to have, but at this moment in time, I think it is still an important score that we have to not just talk about, but take action towards what we can do, whatever tools we have available to move us forward with this.
Other questions or comments from the board? I got Dr. Fleming.
Thank you. Marty touched on this disaggregate information. That's what I've always been interested in, and I've just never quite got that information over the years, is how do our top 10% of test takers do compared to everybody else in the country or in the state? I don't care. However you want to do it. How do our top 25% do? I mean, and then I guess you can go down how they do lower percentiles, but until you disaggregate it, when we've got so many test takers, I'm not sure we're getting a true picture. Now, what's reported in the state, James? That's what it is. I mean, but I want to know the truth. I want to know if we're preparing our kids, whether they're at the top or what. And that's the only way I can figure it out. If you got 1,000 people taking it, I'm not going to figure it out, okay? I'm just going to say one score gets reported, and that's all I got to go on. I mean, as a board member, I want to know, and I want to know if there's a way to know, and I think I've asked this just about every year I've been on the board, but I've never gotten that information.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming.
If I might,
Yes, Dr. Martin.
about every 2 years, I do just what you're saying, Mr. Fleming. I take the performance of my seniors, usually it's the June scores, but I look at the last time that they took the exam, and I disaggregate it based on the recommendations of the College Board. Have they taken the courses and performed as the College Board recommends? And I disaggregate those students out that have done that, as has been mentioned tonight, and recalculate their scores. The last time I did it was not, I'm having it done right now, but 2 years ago, and those seniors scored over 60 points above the national average. And the reason that I did that was I want to know, just like you, are we doing okay as a school with those kids?
Right.
And the answer each and every time, and I've done this for 14 years, each and every time has been, we're doing fine with those kids. If I saw those scores dropping when I disaggregated them, then I'd say, ooh, we got a problem. And so, but I've done that individually.
But you're doing it mine's even better, more than that. That means a lot, but doesn't mean our top 10% is better than our next counties, our next district's 10%. That doesn't mean that. That's the only way I'm going to know if we're teaching. Because really the SAT is for the top 25% of the kids. I mean, let's just face it. I mean, so if I know that, then I know if we're doing right. Of course, I get the information for the next 25% too, but it's a little bit hard to figure out if they're not taking the courses. Then it's hard to tell. But anyway, I understand what you're doing is good. I think you need to do that. I think we all need to do that. But it's hard for me to say, okay, we're 60 points higher than the state average, but that's not the top 10% of the top 10% of the state average. So I mean, that's what I would like to know. I'll never find out. So I don't think I'll go to my grave never finding this disaggregate information out, but maybe one day I will. But thank you for answering it. But I think we at least need to do what you're doing. Good gosh, yes, we need to.
It's tedious to do that. But
other questions? Thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you, Dr.
Can I make one statement to
Ms.
Dr. Martin
Ms.
before he
Spector.
walks away? Are you the only principal in the high school level that's doing that report?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Anybody else?
Here they come now. The answer.
No, I mean, if we got a system, at least we could have a more better understanding of where we sit as a district.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Martin shared that information with us and his approach to disaggregating his data in our data team meeting. So that strategy is a new strategy that was introduced to many of us. So as of immediate, receiving scores for this year. As a matter of fact, we just received our SAT scores here in the last couple of days. I've started the process of doing that myself for Spring Valley High School. So I can't speak about what was done previously, but that is a practice that has been implemented at Spring Valley as of this scoring season for SAT.
So what we really could do, keep you all guys from talking, if you're not doing the report, so once you do your report, then we can put it back on the agenda for them to come in and give us their report.
I'd like to hear what they have to say since they got up and took this thing. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
They can still
Mr.
talk.
Price?
I was going to add to that I've had some of the same inquisitiveness that Dr. Fleming has had, and so I went back and pulled the top 10% of our seniors over the past 3 years. But then I don't have access to the top 10% of other schools nor of the neighboring counties. So all I can do is take a look at how our top 10% are scoring and then compare them with one another against themselves.
Average.
Right.
Thank you. Ms.
So it's a little bit more challenging to do what he's referring to.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Ms. Suber.
Yes, I do the same thing, but I will say, I'm very interested in disaggregating the data because historically, Richland Northeast has, fallen as the last school. And so what I like to do is take a look at the data to compare our the to look at, how our African-American students are doing in comparison to our sister schools, how our white kids are doing as well. And so we just kind of take it a step further because holistically our scores just hadn't been where they needed to be. And so I needed to kind of get an understanding of what's going on at Richland Northeast.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the board, observations?
Ms. Millett, is this
Ms.
data
Manning.
that you regularly look at and making curriculum decisions for our district?
I do work with Debbie and Jeff, and as a matter of fact, Jeff and I had a long conversation today, and we're going to move forward with what they have recommended and what they found out. But yes, we do plan together and we do collaborate, but we will continue this,
And
looking at the data.
Mr. Manning, I'd like to say that, again, the data teams are new in just the last year or so, a couple of years since I've been in the district. We put these things together, and we think that they're going to be very profitable for us, so we can get underneath the data and really take a very comprehensive look. And I think Debbie's been spearheading that with Jeff Potts, and I think it's the right way to go.
So the data team will come up with recommendations and present that back to Ms. Millett?
That's a part of it and beyond, yes.
May I add one thing to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
We do feel like we need to make recommendations, but I think there is a bit of a dilemma with the SAT. On the one hand, we know there are student scholarships dependent on the SAT. It certainly is a PR issue for the district if our students don't do well on the SAT. So we want those scores to be good. The flip side of that is, and if you go back to the information that Jeff presented, it is a very poor predictor of success in college. I think there are real questions about how much of your time and resources do you want to put into improving SAT scores simply to improve the scores versus these needs of students. And part of the process, I think, of making these recommendations is finding the right balance. I can remember days when every English class at high school started with the SAT word of the day, and where there was an SAT math problem of the day. We were spending a huge amount of our curriculum time getting kids ready for one test. And so I think what we need to do is really work hard to find some recommendations that will help the students that need the assistance, that are dependent on it for college admissions, et cetera, but at the same time not overdo and waste resources where they don't need to be expended. And there is some balance there that we're seeking to find.
Other questions, comments, observations from the board? Mrs. Brill.
I'm assuming that every school has a SAT prep class or program, and it's offered to the kids during the school day. Is that correct? Not after school? When are the workshops? Now, they used to, is that correct? Years ago when my kids were in high school. Right. I remember that.
So did
That was part of their day.
Mr. Mills do it on his own time? What now? So did Larry Mills do this on his own time, or was this on?
It's part of their curriculum.
Larry Mills was an independent contractor. We hired him as a consultant to come in and do the courses. He's not one of our faculty members.
Back to the...
I have one more question.
Yes, Ms. Brill.
Is it possible that we would calculate all the scores that are taken, or is that not practical? Do you just use the scores that are taken at their senior year, or which scores are you looking at?
Normally, I don't go back and find out for the whole district who is the highest or what would be the highest potential composite score for all students in a senior course, but I did that this year because of the emphasis, and the average score went up about 55 points for all the students who have taken it multiple times. Their average score for their highest composite was 55 points higher, and we had just over 50% of the students of this senior cohort take the SAT more than one time. But those who ended up taking it more than one time, their score was on average about 50 points higher.
But when you're doing your calculations, you only use one test occasion, right? That's
Yes.
it.
Normally, and that's what the College Board does, is they look at the
Right.
very last.
And that's really not accurate.
No, it doesn't give a good depiction of what their
Because it
highest score
can
would be.
change dramatically, yeah, from time to time. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board? Dr. Ham, I want to revisit a comment that you made. And if we expand the conversation, looking at the end of course exam, for example, and I'm looking at that data, using probably a better predictor, our U.S. history scores are struggling to barely exceed 50% of the students passing it. And so looking at that, English we're doing a little bit better. We're doing very strongly in algebra. Looking at that data where it shows that we are struggling in U.S. history in terms of end of course exams, how then do we sort of reconcile students' performances at the exit exam, the AP, with the marginal performance on end of course U.S. history?
I'll say a couple of things about that. First of all, I want to make a comment about the U.S. history
Sure.
examination. If you would follow the technical proceedings and the things that have come out of the State Department of Education, a review that was done by the Education Oversight Committee, there has been general agreement that that is an extraordinarily difficult examination. And in fact, it is very challenging to even be able to put together a course sequence, like a scope and sequence. You could cover the content that's required on that exam in the amount of days that are available in a U.S. history course, let alone at the depth. And they are tough questions on that. So I don't think that U.S. history is appropriate to single out. There are definitely well-recognized difficulties with the test itself. Even students who do well on the AP U.S. history test often do not do well on South Carolina's
That's exactly what I meant
history
when I asked you how do you reconcile that. That's exactly where I was going.
So I think that's an issue. But I think when you look at SAT, the alarm was a 40-point drop. That seems like such a huge drop. And one of the first things we looked at as a committee was what do the rest of the data tell us about what's going on at high school? And you mentioned those other exams. ACT scores are slowly going up. The other ones are very steady. None of it points to a high school curriculum big problem. And my personal take on this is we always want to improve the curriculum and instruction that we deliver for kids. And there is room for improvement on every one of these assessments. And that needs to drive our decisions. SAT is not a curriculum-based test. As Jeff pointed out, it started out as an aptitude test. That's point number one. The second thing I'd say is it has a large margin of error. Some years our scores are going to be high, and sometimes they're going to be low just because of flukiness in the sample that took the test or the day they took it. And I really think that this is an anomaly. Next year, if we're this low, or next year we have a drop again, I think we throw up a big red flag and say, what's going on with our kids? But I think we need to be cautious about making too much of just 1 year of these scores going down. And I also don't want us to do flips when they go way up, because those errors happen on both ends. They can be high or low, and occasionally statistically that just happens. And we have sliced and diced this data trying to find a reason why we would have a 40-point drop. We know we had more test takers. We know we had more minority test takers. That has traditionally made a difference on test scores, but those things don't explain the drop. I truly believe the drop was kind of a fluke, and that we need to continue to monitor it.
Thank you. When you look at the end of, not the end of course I just mentioned that, when you look at the exit exam, performance in terms of the percentage of students who are passing the South Carolina exit exam. I'm assuming, Debbie, Jeff, this is the number of passing it taken the first time or multiple times?
Jeff put that together. He'll have to tell
Those are first-time test takers.
First-time test takers. And so those that are passing English first-time test takers is above 90%, almost 91% of students taking the exit exam for the first time are passing it. On math, it's not as strong. It's about a little less than 84%. But again, that's pretty significant. Do you know how that compares statewide, Jeff? Are we in that category below the average, at the average, above the state average in terms of students passing it, taking it the first time?
We're either right. I wish I had the chart in front of me, but we're either right at or above where this is at in the state. And I know we're above it for English. I think we're right at, in terms of math, the state average. If not, I think we're a little bit above. So I don't have those figures.
Sure, that's fine. Debbie, you also mentioned the AP exam. I was looking at that as well, and looking at the number of students who pass the AP with a score of 3 or higher. We dropped a little bit in our district, but we still are about 71%. But did I hear you say we've also increased the number of students who are taking the AP exam?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had an increase in the number of students taking the exam. I want to say we almost have somewhere between a 6 and a 9% increase yearly in terms of the raw number of students taking the AP exam, I think, for the last couple of years.
And those are making a 3 or higher only dropped less than 0.5%.
I think in the last 4 years, it's always been between about 71.4 and 72.4 or 5% for the last couple of years.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Debbie. Next on our agenda, school calendar information.
Yes, Mr. Chair, at this time I'll call on Ken Blackstone to lead the conversation on school calendar information.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and Dr. Brochu and staff, tonight I would like to introduce several members of the Superintendent's Faculty Advisory Council who will present the proposed 2013-14 calendar for information tonight, and also discuss the process of how the calendar was developed and adopted by the FAC. Leading the presentation tonight is Lisa McAlpine from Blythewood High School, and several of her team members are going to come up with her, and I'll ask if she would introduce those colleagues.
Good evening.
Good evening.
With me tonight is Brenda Warno from Catawba Trails Elementary, Jamie Westmoreland from Kelly Mill Middle, Cheryl Hunter, from Summit Parkway, Terry Butts from Bridge Creek Elementary, who is also our District Teacher of the Year, and then Mr. Bruton, who kind of guided us through this process. Okay. I wanted to start out and kind of tell you about the process that we did this year with the calendar. After we had our initial meeting with Dr. Brochu just to kind of organize the Superintendent's Faculty Advisory Council this year, we had a design team meeting for the calendar where we had teachers, staff, and parents all come together one evening. And at that time, we were given some parameters for the calendar that we know we have to follow by state law in terms of start date, how many days we have to have on the calendar, student days versus teacher days, when holidays fell during the next calendar year, so we could look at those and be all on the same page as that. They also gave us what they are projecting as testing windows for our major tests, HSAT, PASS, those types of things. And then we were tasked to work either as groups or as individuals, and the groups varied in size. There was one calendar, I think Ashley said, that was done by one person, by one parent, submitted a calendar. They sat at the table and did it by themselves. Most of them, though, were group calendars. We gave those calendars to Ashley. He put them all into a standard form, and then the Superintendent's Faculty Advisory Council met as a group, and we looked at all of those calendars and then winnowed them down into 3 calendars to take back to all of our staff members. Each
representative from each of the schools, then took the calendars back and shared them with their staff, mostly through email, doing some talking points at faculty meetings, that type of thing. And then all the staff and faculty were asked to vote on their choice for the calendar. All of those votes were then aggregated and sent to Ashley, who then aggregated them for the district. What we're proposing is the calendar that's in your board packet, also shown on the board here. And what I kind of like to do at this point is kind of go through and walk you through our calendar and what we saw with it.
Which calendar is it?
Which one's
B?
We've got A, B, C here.
It's calendar B, sorry.
Oh, okay.
So you're proposing calendar B?
Yes, ma'am. Calendar B has a teacher start date of August 14th with a student start date of August 21. This follows state law in terms of not being able to start before the third Monday in August. These are both Wednesdays. One of the things that was very important to a lot of us on the both the design team, but then the Faculty Advisory Council as a whole, was having a shorter start week, because we know that students getting back into the routine of things, it's very difficult, and we have those few days to kind of start, get things rolling, and then give them a break to gather supplies, kind of reorganize, that type of thing before we go on. We have teacher in-service days on the calendar set for October 17th, February 14th, March 28th, April 21st, and May 30. We tried to get some of these towards the end of quarters or grading periods if we could, but also knowing that those were also flexible due to testing shifts, et cetera. We have 2 weeks for the winter holidays. The second semester also has a shorter start. It begins on January 16th, so there's a 2-day start for that second semester, where at the high school you're switching classes traditionally, and so we've got a short start week for that changeover as well. School ends on June 2nd, or June 6th, excuse me, for the students, which is a Friday, and then June 7th is the last work day for the teachers, which is a Saturday. We also have within this calendar what we're calling 2 mini breaks, one in October and one in February. The one in October is a 4-day weekend where the students have off the 17th, which is the teacher in-service day, and then it is a both student and teacher holiday on the 18th. And then in February, we have a student holiday on February 14th, and then teacher student holidays on February 17th and 18th. These were built in to give us a little break in both semesters around those. We also tried with the October break, not that it is of great importance to a lot of us, but that tends to be Fair Week when we lose a lot of students to Fair, and we thought it would be nice to kind of actually give them a day to do that if that's what they wanted to do. But then also for our teachers as well. This particular calendar was designed really as a compromise calendar. We know last year that the calendar became very contentious, and it was very polarizing. There were people who really, really wanted that February break and people who really, really didn't. And it became very disheartening for a lot of us to see that go forward. And so when we looked at this calendar, we really did try to compromise to give us that February break, but also to give us a break in the fall. Because when we looked at last year's calendar, a lot of us saw in the spring, it seemed that we had a break every time we turned around, whether it was a long weekend or that full week. But in the fall, we didn't. And so when we looked at these calendars, part of what we did was to intentionally look at, are we giving ourselves breaks when we know as teachers we need breaks, but also when we know students need breaks. And when we pulled this calendar together, we were very intent on looking at what we thought was best for all of our students, and what academically was going to help them the most without impinging
on their family time as well. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments from the board?
Ms. McCall.
Mr. Manning.
Yes, sir.
I've probably been one of the most vocal proponents of not having that February break, but I have visited, I don't know how many of you know, but I've made a commitment to visit every SIC in the district, and I will tell you that overwhelmingly teachers and other parents have been calling me, and they said that they would like to have that week, and that they were upset because we as a board overrode that decision to have the February week. So I'm ready to reverse a lot of the work that I've done against that week. And so I want to make sure the compromise that you guys have made, is that truly what you want, or do you want the February break? If y'all are happy with that, then I'm good with it to have the split. If you want the February week back, then I'm willing to support whatever y'all want for those breaks.
When we looked at calendars, the three options that we took back to the schools, one of them had the February break, the full week February break. One was this particular calendar. One was what is calendar A in your packet, which has no breaks whatsoever anywhere. Nobody voted for calendar A. It was pretty well split though between B and C.
Now, calendar A has the spring break in it.
All of them have spring break.
Spring break and.
But there's no February other than spring break.
Okay,
there is no other break in calendar A. And it was a close vote. And you can read into that what you will. But we can, look back to what happened last week with presidential elections. No matter how close it gets, there was still a winner and there was still a loser. So.
Other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Brill.
Mr. Manning,
Yes.
I like what they proposed. I think it's awesome. Good job.
Other questions or comments from the board? Ms. Spector.
I'm really going out on the limb, so Bill, don't even bother me. Just can we add it to the calendar? It's not have a day off, but just, we've gotten a lot of people from the military about us not taking Veterans Day off. Can we just add in November Veterans Day so the schools, more so just to let the parents know that we do celebrate in certain ways where there are events inside the schools? Can we just have it on the calendar? I think it would be good just to recognize them.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I appreciate your question. Up until this point, we have been advised that we feel as though we can better celebrate Veterans Day within the schools. And any parent, I challenge any parent or community member that questions that to please come and see what we do during that day and, in fact, that week leading up to that. And it is an awesome experience regardless of where you are. It's truly powerful. And I understand that this can be done outside of school, but to see our community come into our schools and our military personnel and to recognize our faculty and staff who have former military experience really is a fantastic opportunity.
And that's why I think if we just add it on the calendar so parents know that they have that opportunity, because they might be just looking at this piece of paper and not able to get emails or flyers sent home or whatever.
Right. Well, I think it would be great if we could really put an emphasis on bringing people into the schools next year during our Veterans Day celebrations. Right. I think that's something that we should be mindful of, Mr. Blackburn.
That's what I'm...
And I believe we do that routinely in every one of our schools. Bring people.
Are you clear on what she's saying? Or she's saying simply add the
statement,
add the notation. Not that you take a day off.
The notation. Yeah, not have the day off or anything.
Thank you very much.
No, just add the statement on the school calendar itself.
And should we add the statement, Columbus Day? I think we'll make that gentleman extremely happy who spoke at our last board meeting, Mr. Abraham.
Well, I just think it's great that the community knows that we are doing something within the schools on those days so the students are learning about the history or whatever.
Thank you. Question as relates to spring break, where does it fall in relationship to Easter? Before, after, the next week? Can you tell me that on the calendar you're proposing?
This year it falls before.
On that April?
Yes, sir. Easter is
It would be what, the 14th?
April 20th.
The
Yes, sir.
20th? So they would be off
They would,
the week prior to Easter?
yes, sir.
Great, okay, thank you very much.
They'd be off the week prior to Easter,
Yes,
and then they would be off the Monday after Easter.
Yes,
that's correct.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's
I
wonderful.
like that.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Anderson?
Out of the many years that I've gone over the calendars, this is the first year in a long time that I can say I like your calendar.
Thank you.
And I like your statement on where you worked hard to compromise with the parents, those who did not want the winter break and the spring, but whatever that break is, and those who did want it. And I admire you guys for that, because I know it was not easy for you to calculate these days and make them come out just right. The only thing I hate is there still being school June 6th. When I looked over here and I went, ooh, Labor Day, Memorial Day, they're out. But then I can live with the June 6th, because I know the school calendar is always difficult to do. But I want to commend you guys. I think you've done a very good job trying to make sure that the teachers are not burnt out, the students are not burnt out, and the compromise with the parents. And I know a lot of parents do have difficulties with the child care, back to back, winter break, and then, the Christmas break, and then another winter break. So I just want to applaud each of you for doing such a wonderful job. Not that I'm saying the previous teams have not done a wonderful job, but I just appreciate you guys going that extra mile to try to compensate for everybody.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Other comments or questions on the board? Thank you, folks, very much.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, the agenda items for our next board meeting, which will be on December 4th. Dr. Brochu?
Yes, we have, our meeting will be held, first off, at Center for Achievement. We have a student focus report, a budget update. We'll be bringing the school calendar for the school year 2013-2014 to you for potential approval, and we will have a report on our backup and security of our data through our IT department.
Thank you, Dr. Brochu. Are there any additional items that board members would like to add to the next board meeting or any future board meeting?
Mr. Chair, on a
Anderson.
future board meeting,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to look at the Center for Achievement. This future, I want to look to see what's going on there, because that was supposed to be our Saving Grace School program. And on the report, it's not doing what we expected it to do. I'd like some investigation to go, and it does not have to be at the next board meeting.
Certainly.
But I'd just like for us to get to the bottom, what's going on there, because I've asked for another program at this end of the district.
Absolutely.
So I would just like to get some ideas of what's going on, what we can do to bring those scores up.
Absolutely, Ms. Anderson. Thank you very much. Any other items, requests from the board?
Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Manning.
One of the things that we talked about last year was the fact that we have a lot of students that are moving around the district, in and out of the district, and that this is, I think at the time it was told to us, one of the number one issues facing our district. Since that was brought up last year, it seems that there's probably been an opportunity to have some discussions about concrete methods to help with this issue. And I would like, within maybe the next one or two board meetings, that we have a report on what those concrete actions are that we're doing to improve, to help with this situation, since that's one of our top issues affecting our district.
Mr. Manning, for clarification, are you talking about our transient population?
Correct.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, it's just something that a lot of our school improvement council meetings, our principals and our parents, it's a question that comes up,
Sure.
and something that I think is kind of on the forefront of a lot of folks' minds. So.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Other requests for future board meeting agenda items? Hearing none, thank you very much. At this time, we have our second public participation. No one has signed up for it. However, if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the board, you have an opportunity to do so at this time. Thank you very much. All right, finally, we have our board and superintendent comments. I'll start with you, Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to congratulate all of our award recipients. I enjoyed the explanation on the design project at the two schools. I had talked with both of them and knew quite a bit about the program. And I'm just excited about the program because every child, as I've always stated, they don't learn the same way. And as I looked at the short video of the children interacting, I think that's going to grow and prove to be a very positive program within our district. So that will be one thing that I will be following closely so that we can push, because we think that all children are molded and shaped alike with the same brain, but we as adults are not, so why do we expect children to be the same way? And I just appreciate all of the condolences and calls and cards and everything. And pass it to my mother. I have not finished my thank you notes, but I will eventually get to them. But I just want you guys to know, outpour of support for my family and I. We will never forget all of you in District 2, and we appreciate it. And she was one sweet lady. I miss her, but it's okay for God to take her home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mrs. Brill?
And I will never forget your mother's funeral because it was on my birthday.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was sorry I couldn't be there.
Oh, I understand.
But Melinda was a wonderful daughter in life and in the end of life. So it's awesome when your daughter's a nurse.
Thank you.
Very special. Just want to say that I'm grateful to have been reelected. It was an exciting campaign. I saw Mr. Jackson everywhere. And it was a busy time. Though we have not been certified, once we are, we will have the, installation program.
That's correct.
Look forward to working with you all and being a part of Richland 2 for another 4 years. Deeply honored. Want to say that the SAT report was very interesting and very thought-provoking and gives us a lot of information and data as we move forward, ways to think about what we're doing, how we can, make changes and improvements. And, I would support bringing back Mr. Mills and let him teach his class during the school day, things that my kids had. But I know that's not necessarily the answer too. But I appreciate the information, and we'll stay on top of all that and continue to work with you all any way that we can. I did think the project-based learning teachers, that was so very interesting, and I just wondered if that's something that we shouldn't have at every high school, if we haven't thought about that, and is it not considered a magnet status, because it is something that I think would appeal to a lot of students. So I think that's very exciting.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. Mr. Manning.
Mr. Jackson, I want to thank everybody for the hard work, the data team for the work that you put in. I do think the data teams will be invaluable in the direction that we go, or that we need to go in a district. I think that, and I find myself doing this too, is that sometimes we focus so much on our high schools and the scores and sort of the end of the road for our students. But we all know that where we really should be focusing most of our time is on our elementary school students, pre-K and elementary, because those are the foundations that are really going to drive what comes out of our high schools in a lot of cases. And so I would really like to see us, because it is a district, begin to focus on what are some of the initiatives, the things that we're doing, the changes that we're making in our elementary and pre-K programs. What are the indicators that we're looking at for success, whether they be SAT or whatever other indicators that we look at as a district, and really like to see us make those concrete in a way that we can all understand what they are and help to drive us as a district. And so I would really like to see that, I think, from us as a board and us as a district, begin to spend more time focusing on those students who are moving up through the ranks. Not that our high school students certainly aren't important, but I do think sometimes we have an unusually high focus on that side of it as opposed to our next generations, that we can make a bigger impact now. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manning. Ms. Spector?
But she slipped out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She did it very quietly.
Yeah,
she didn't notice.
Dr. Fleming.
I too am grateful for the teams that are looking at the data. I get more confused. I've done this a long time, and sometimes I get more confused the longer I do it because nobody has the answers really.
That's true.
I mean, there's some things that we put great emphasis years ago on this thing. I mean, getting students ready and spending money, and I'm not sure what all it's going to take. But I do know one thing, that next week's Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of times we need to start thinking about the blessings we have here in our district, in your family, in our lives. And maybe we shouldn't complain so much. I'm the worst. Don't get me wrong. The finger is me. I'm not talking about you. But I think we need to leave our complaints sometimes, and count our blessings. And I hope you take time next week to be with your family, have a good time on your day off and your week off, or most of your week off, and come back ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. I, along with Mrs. Brill, certainly are very thankful that this election process is over. It was a very grueling process in a lot of ways, and I'm very humbled and honored that the citizens of Richland 2 decided to allow Mrs. Brill and me an opportunity to come back and serve you for another 4 years. And for those that voted for us, we are grateful and deeply appreciative. Those who chose not to, we will represent you just as vigorously. As far as the calendar committee is concerned, I want to commend you for an excellent job in doing the calendar, giving it some serious forethought as it relates to trying to find a compromise that would address multiple issues. Thank you very much for an excellent job. And I also agree that the overall academic success of our students is critical, and that success must be measured and it must be monitored. We can debate how we measure it and what instruments we use to measure it, but at the end of the day, their academic success needs to be validated, and we need to be able to validate that they are in fact achieving at high levels by whatever instruments you use to measure that. So with that, I will thank you again very much for your presence tonight. At this time, Dr. Brochu, any comments from you?
I just wanted to say a couple of things about our recent Parent Partnership Summit. So many folks were able to spend a good portion of their day. We had well over 300 participants that really gave their time, their energy, their effort, their commitment, and their passion to this district, and certainly in light of that, to the nearly 27,000 students as we are thinking toward the future. I sincerely thank Fred McDaniel and so many folks in our district, Rich Robinson, for keeping track and making certain that we got all of the addresses that we needed to, and make sure that the invitations were taken care of. And I think that great benefit. Again, large number of people that came. We have wonderful opportunities ahead, and like you, Dr. Fleming, I think it's important to be thankful for those things that obviously we sometimes lose sight of because there's often challenges, and we're also thinking about obstacles and how to get past those, but really it's in those obstacles that you face that you move forward and get to a new place and a better place. So with that, I think our district is on that path. Thank you.
Also, I'd like to thank Dr. Ham for her report tonight, and the team that worked with her, and talking specifically about testing in general and the SAT. Thank you very much for that. It was extremely beneficial, and certainly appreciate the hard work that you put into that effort. Any comments from cabinet members? Okay. Hearing none, at this time the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second it.
Moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Ms. Brill. No further discussion. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night to you folks.